A very good evening to everyone. On behalf of NIA CSP team and also Professor Sangeeta Menon, I welcome you all for yet another Friday lecture. Like each Friday, we bring to you a new speaker and interesting topics. So I would first request Professor Sangeeta Menon to say a few words, and then I'll request Meera to please introduce today's speaker. Over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, and it is so wonderful to see Nitinji after so many years in Hyderabad.
Goodness, really.
We discussed Katha Upanishad. So it's indeed a pleasure to see you here. And of course, we look forward to your work, and it's incredible work with children. And so we really look forward to the work today, which you will present to us. And thank you for being here. I just wanted to say thanks to you. So I said to Niharika that, okay, today I have to be there.
It's an absolute pleasure and an honor to see you again and to be part of your group. And I hope it's a message from Nachiketa that we just carry on the beautiful work that you've been doing. I've been following it, and you have a silent fan out here.
Thank you. Thank you, Niharika.
I request Meera to please introduce the speaker of today and also the topic. Over to you, Meera.
Thank you, Niharika. And warm welcome to you, sir. Mr. Nitin Donde has been living his passion for the arts in a digital world. Photography, classical animation, and filmmaking, working with children and traditional tribal artists have taken him from remote villages to international film festivals. He has extensive teaching experience in the field of animation filmmaking and has won awards including the Golden Snail Grand Prix Prize Serbia and First Prize Eye of Animation Denmark. So it is indeed a pleasure to have you today with us, sir. We welcome you to the talk.
Hello, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be on this great platform, thinking about positive thoughts and beautiful things, and looking within and finding something new and beautiful about yourself and the world around you. So, as you all know, I work with children because they make me happy, and we have a great time, and children have a great imagination that we grown-ups sort of slowly lose, and there's a lot to learn from children, and I've been very fortunate. I've had almost 5,000 odd children who've taught me so many wonderful and unbelievable things that I'm really grateful to them. The last film which one little girl, all of 8 years old, made in one of my online animation workshops just about a week ago, in which she grabs a rainbow and then she floats across the rainbow, grabbing hold at one edge of this rainbow. She flies across to a magical garden, you know, and just the visual of this, of a little girl holding on to the edge of a rainbow, you know, it takes us to this very sort of abstract and, you know, fun and colorful and amazing sort of a world. And, you know, it's wonderful that, you know, the children can teach us to look at, you know, ordinary things and then to build beautiful things out of it. So along with my journey with children, of course, all of us have a sort of a spiritual journey of our own, I'm sure. And so have I. And this spiritual journey has been sort of powered by two great gurus I met. One was my guru of art. His name was Mesho Moshai Bhuvan Bihari Ghosh. And he gave me these golden words, which was after reading a few passages from the Savitri of Sri Aurobindo, and his words were, "I absolve you of all responsibility of earning money." So I was probably just 27, 28 years old, and having been absolved of all responsibility from earning money, then the things that you have to do in your life are sort of very sort of getting defined, and so the journey of art, where you're just looking at beauty and something aesthetic, and you spend your whole life looking at it, and then after some time it starts sort of growing inside you. So with this amazing sort of insight that if you're not really chasing anything commercial at all, then you are forced, so to say, to look at only things that are aesthetic, artistic, beautiful, creative, amazing, things that get you awestruck, and that's a good space to be in, I think. After about 40 years of living like that, I think it's a good space to be in. My other guru was called Swami Ramananda, and he was a Moni Baba. He didn't speak. And I had the fortune of interacting with a lot of deaf and dumb people when I was a little boy, because my mother started about 15, 20 deaf and dumb schools all over India. And so I could understand what the Moni Baba was saying from the first time that I met him. And the amazing thing about interacting with him was that everything was in silence. And in an evening of 3 or 4 hours, if I sat with him, he probably communicated just 100 words. And in those 100 words, he had to tell me whatever he wanted to tell me, and the other people sitting there. So in the films that I'm making, I am also sort of inspired by a lot of books that one gets to read, like the Upanishads. And in fact, the story of Nachiketa, to me, I'm such a fan of that story for so many years. To me, it's one of the most amazing stories to create into film or animation. And we could get Nachiketa into modern times. So, and give him a superpower. And what would the superpower of Nachiketa be? Can anybody think of something? What would the superpower of Nachiketa? You have Spider-Man who can spray out spider webs, and you have Superman. Supposing you were to tell the story of Nachiketa to the regular young child of today, what superpower would you give Nachiketa? And the thought came to me that, Nachiketa had this superpower that he had overcome the fear of death. I don't know if any of you have seen anime, but, in anime, they use this kind of a technique. They're telling young people, philosophical messages, but they're using their, folklore and their, old stories from the Puranas, for instance, and they're converting them, and they're putting it there for the children, and the children get a lot of energy out of that kind of stuff, So my take is that Nachiketa would make a great story. He has a superpower. He has no fear of death. And so he can do things that other children can't do. And, that could make something amazing. So the film that I'm going to show you today, called Breathe in Life or Prana, and Breathe Out Music, or Dhwani, is again from one of the Upanishads. And just that one statement sort of, it sort of took my breath away, that the first thing that I did when I was born was I inhaled and I got in touch with prana and I cried. And then the last thing I did, or I'm going to do, is I'm going to inhale, but I'm not going to get any prana. And then I'm going to exhale. And that exhale is going to be like a sigh. And then I started thinking that, why did I cry? Probably when I was in the womb, it was like, floating in some kind of magical fluid, And probably after you die, that's why you sigh, because it's like a dream, a beautiful dream. You're completely self-sufficient and you're alive inside your mother's womb, But you're floating. It's one sort of magical sort of space I started feeling, And then again, probably when you die, you go back to that magical space and you're so relieved to have left all this, Maya, so to say, that we all live with, And then the thought that, what about this cosmos? You lie down, you're all alone, say in the wilderness, in the forest, and you've been in the wilderness for a few days. So you've seen all that is outside, which is beautiful, and now you're looking inside yourself, And when you look inside, from a spiritual or a meditative point of view, there's nothing inside. It's empty. And then over a period of time, if you've been in the wilderness, like I spent a year staying in the wilderness at one session when I was studying nature, and you find that nature is gone inside you, and what you're seeing inside is what is outside, and there's some sort of a harmony that is happening. So, and this harmony is sort of cosmic, I started feeling, I studied physics, incidentally, before I started working with children in animation. So that little physics man in me is still there. And I felt that this whole cosmic sort of magic, which is happening outside, is probably also happening inside. And then this emptiness which is inside is obviously sort of getting filled up with this cosmic thing that is outside. So that's something about the film, and I'll just put it on for you. I have to share the screen. Can you see it? Is it visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One second. एक बार बंद कर। वो लाल बटन दबा,
वीडियो बंद कर दे,
फिर से दबा,
बंद कर दे।
शुरू कर। कुछ मत हो, बैठ रहने। Oops. Sorry. Well, so that is what came out of that simple statement. Breathing life. And then since you've got prana inside you, then, you can, you have various choices, you can be musical, you can be artistic, because you have to communicate. You've been given dhwani, and with the dhwani, you're going to say something, you're going to show something, you're going to tell the people something that you saw that was amazing or unbelievable, or something that was divine, or something that sort of was build your, whole being into some, new space, or something that you really, learned. So that is from the Taittiriya, inspired by the Taittiriya Upanishad. Then, when I was talking to you about my guru, Meshomeshai Bon Bihari Ghosh, and I used to show him my photographs. And he asked me one day, Nitin, is this your business, or is this your art form? And I'd really got into photography as a passion as a school kid, So I said, this is more a sort of art form, It's what I see around and what I think, I'd like to capture. So he said, well, if it's an art form, then you can't make any money from it. Because if you have to excel in your art, then you have to reach a particular level of excellence before you can do anything with it. So he set me on this journey where I followed, the first word he gave me was water. And I followed water from the Himalayas, from the snow. I trailed down the little rivulets and the rivers and the sea and the lakes and the desert. And this collection of photographs that I've got together as a book are mostly the meditative, sort of visuals, because I'm sure all of you at one point in your life or the other have sat in meditation in front of a water body like a sea or a lake. And you know that the water body sort of always gives you this very serene, peaceful, sort of energy. And I spent almost 2 years chasing this water story. I sat by the lakes. I used to sit there from 4 o'clock in the morning and go with a torch and go to different corners of the lake, depending on where the sun is rising or where the moon is rising, and watch the water for hours. And then the patterns in the lake suddenly started becoming like Om patterns. If I was at the right time and the breeze was in a particular way and the sky had a blue sky and a really white clouds, then the patterns on the surface of that water, the same water that I'd been observing every day, would change. And after 2 years, when I showed Mesho Mosham my work, he said, "Now, Nitin, you're drowning." So I'll give you the next word. And the next word he gave me was Tej. He said, if I give you fire, then you'll burn. And so fire isn't right. So the next word is Tej. And Tej means sort of an inner glow, we could call it an aura, but inner glow. Uska chehre pe tej hai, they say in Hindi, which is sort of, really chasing light, a beam of light, and looking at what a beam of light could do, like if you're under a tree, that beam of light could be just sort of falling on one patch of leaves, and the rest of the leaves could be dark, and these dried leaves could be very colorful. So that is just the observation of, light. And then when you look at children, and that's how I came to children, and I've stayed with them so many years, you see that sort of, it's not like a human glow, it's like an unbelievable glow. It's that positivity that the child exudes because he's so dreamy and he's so happy, or she's so happy, that and then is that complete innocence and that complete sort of trust that creates some kind of a tej on that child's face. So I'm going to just sort of share these few photographs with you. I write quite often, but I write very small things, 4 lines or 6 lines at the best. So I'm just going to sort of, and when you look at these images, I'd like you to think meditative, because the whole idea of what I'm presenting to you here is that, there's that meditative sort of character or energy in water, that I've tried to capture. Oh, sorry, 1 minute. I need to first share my screen. Oops, sorry. Yeah, that's the cover of the book. I maybe need to tell you it was a rainy day. You shouldn't be carrying your cameras around, on a rainy day in the forest. And then this is a lake near Nainital. It's called the Lake Region of Kumaon, Sattal. And for that very moment that the boat was there, this light streak was there. And I so happened to have had my camera outside and the exposure is ready for it, that I could capture it. And so one of my very sort of teach myself lessons is that to be on time, you have to be a little before time. Because if you're not there before time and you haven't set yourself up to be on time, then you miss the boat. And in nature, things are very transient. This streak of light would have been on this boat for all of probably 1 or 2 minutes, and so that's how it is. These photographs were exhibited at the India Habitat Center, and people wrote very nice things like, in all its beauty, nature's overwhelming presence is in its tranquility. You have captured it so well. And then, is it sunlight in water, or is it water in sunlight? Is it ripples in water, or is it water in ripples? Amazing work, touches the heart. I like most of all when the earth and the sky become one, and the series in gold. I like it all. But I'll just read you the last one below that, which is so sweet of her to have written it, which says, she says, God is visible. It is amazing. So sweet of her. So, I mean, this is nothing, it's just the lake and the sunlight touching the oak trees which surround this lake. And it's just the reflection of that lake. But I like it because it has that sort of emerald, magical emerald sort of thing. And when you're sitting there and you're watching it, you can really see there's a dance going on out there all the time. And this is from the Rig Veda. Water creates bliss. Water gives us energy. With great delight, we look at water. And this. Sorry. I'm getting a message saying, please move this window away from the shared. Are you managing to see these images?
Yes, sir, we can see that, but we can also see the message that you're seeing.
Okay, so I'll ignore it. I call this Devi with Veena. If you look at where the glow of the sunlight is, you can see there is a face there. And the black at the back is the hair. And if you can notice, she's sitting in Padmasana. And of course, this is a computer digital image, so you can't really make out. But when the print is there, you can see that she's also carrying a veena. Or maybe my imagination takes me there, I don't know. But, this is what I saw in this one. And I call this the radiance of the Shiva Linga, because this little tuft of sand that you see there is like a Shiva Linga, and these little waves of water which was trapped, by the beach after the tide has gone back, they are like the vibrations of nature. This is sort of, I was just lucky to be there at Kovalam when this amazing sort of sunset was happening. And, everywhere there was just gold. I was just laughing at myself and saying, how much gold do you want, Nitin? There's as much gold out here on this beach as you can grab. But only thing is that it's there for a fraction of time because everything is transient. So... this is why I like this is because, sort of the earth is the earth, the clouds are sort of kissing the earth, and there's no fantastic color or anything like that. It's just that when you're walking on some space like this, it feels as if you're walking in heaven. You're walking on clouds, and there's this most beautiful breeze, and it's so refreshing, and it's so beautiful that it only touches the divine in you. Mother and child going back home. Walk with me across the shore, our footsteps like the sands of time. And, you've all been to the beach, there's these amazing skies. And this one on the left-hand side, there was also a little moon, which you probably can't see so well, and like the new moon at twilight, let me return to my home, which is what we all do. And then I have been more than 1,000 new moons in the sky. And, I keep reminding myself, I've just crossed the 60-year barrier. And you say that, okay, Nitin, you probably have 10 good years. But 10 good years are just sort of 3,600 days. It's not a mammoth amount of time. So the fact that you've gone through 1,000 new moons, it's about 30,000 days probably, or something like that. And you're just lucky. You're just lucky that you have the opportunity of seeing a new moon every 15 days, and I hope you make an effort to see it. Isn't that just amazing? The splash in the sky. There's a shocking pink, and then there is that blue, which you only see when the sky is crystal clear and there's no pollution. And then we have the sickle moon. And this is lightning, a storm in the sky, a burst in the clouds, flashes of lightning. And this is also lightning. This is the lake where I spent almost a year, and where I had the great opportunity to enjoy the water. It's called the Emerald Lake, Pannatal. It's one of the 7 lakes in the lake region of Kumaon, and it's owned by a Christian ashram. But they were very sweet. They gave me this beautiful cottage, a walking distance from this lake. Of course, this was in the 1990s, but it was at 1,000 rupees a day. This is, a natural spring and lake. And this is this classic whole thing that, what I enjoyed so much about looking at water was, this whole magic of, that happens on the surface of the lake all the time. All the time it is dancing there. And every 10, 15 minutes, the shadows are moving, the light is moving, this is happening, that is happening. And we as laymen, when we go there for the first time, we say, okay, lake, nice water, maybe I can dip my feet in. But when you're looking at it and you're sitting there and watching this magic happening, this amazing thing sort of happening in front of your eyes, I'm really telling you, it's unbelievable. But the thing is that probably you have to sit at the same place and watch the same lake for maybe 10 days or 15 days, or maybe, spend maybe 10 hours in a day sitting and looking at it, when then the sort of the vision of it and the amazing things sort of just pop out from nature. Sitting silent by the lake, a green forest, open blue sky, bliss came in waves. And now it's only because I know it probably that I'm observing that some waves are blue. I mean, come on, why? It's a lake. There are forests all around. There are oak trees everywhere. I'm sitting in the same position. Why did these waves turn blue? Is the question. And what is this blue? It's of course the sky. But just this band of blue, like a painting you're making, and you're using shades of green and probably a little dashes of yellow there, and then suddenly there's this sky blue. Amazing. And these blues are moving. I'm showing them to you in stills, but I'm sure your imagination would be sparked to look at it and know that it's all moving out there. See the music, hear the light, gentle waves make a song. And then, of course, we have that great saying, everything that moves, moves because of me. And there were two nuclear physicists who bought these paintings. And, when I asked them, there's a set of two of them. And when I asked them, why did you select these? Because to me, it denotes music. This photograph shows music. And they said that it's fractal physics, and they saw so many sort of fractal elements that they found in this image. So this is the set of two fractals. This was in the US. I was making a film on this lake. It's called Lake Tahoe. And this place is known as, it's called Emerald Bay. And it's probably the most photographed place in the world. And I came here at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I put my video camera here because right over the horizon, the sun is going to rise. And as the sun rises, the color of this lake is going to change. And I had planned to shoot it for 3 hours from 4 o'clock in the morning to 7 in the morning, and then play it, fast speed so that you saw how the whole sort of color of this whole thing changed. And then I had another camera, which was a still camera. And then I suddenly noticed that this little island in the middle is looking like a shivling, because that is that little lingam, and the water around it is shaped just like a yoni. And just when I was thinking like that, you see this band of colored wave or reflection which comes out, and you notice that it's quite a bit like an Om. So that Om appeared, and I was lucky enough to capture it. Oops, sorry, I want to. You can see that, how beautifully the pattern has come. And, it all depends on the clouds and the light. Dawn at Emerald Bay. Now look at this, it leaves me speechless, because it's like abstract art. It's telling you something. It's of course crystal clear, absolutely crystal clear water. You can just catch it in your hands and you can drink it. So it's absolute, that pure Himalayan, lake water, which is untinted by any human intervention. It has that beautiful quality. The visual music conquers the world in silence. And feel the joy, the throbbing rhythm of pure water mountain lakes. A restless yearning for the earth, to be the dust below my feet, to be a cloud, a ripple, a raindrop, a splash. I love this because, I don't know, it sort of is that upside down, and it's just a simple tree by the side of the lake giving this beautiful reflection. And my life seems like a series of events and accidents, yet when I look back, I see a pattern. This is by Mandelbrot, who brought out the theory of chaos. He contributed a lot to it. Patterns. Now sparkle, that was another thing that I suddenly noticed, on the lakeside, was that at some particular time in the day, the water is going to start sparkling. And this sparkle is like a diamond, it's amazing. And it's just at the tip of the wave. It's just like that little crescent that rises up, and beautiful. Look at that, it's gems, priceless gems out there for the moment. Inhale the sparkle of dancing water. Exhale the breath of life. This one I call Tamosoma Jyotirgamaya. Obviously, like take me from darkness to light. Is that whole shade of jet black to absolute white that photographers are always sort of, dreading to get, but also aspiring to get if, you know. And this is that whole lead me, dear mother, from darkness to light, from ignorance to wisdom. Oh, healing waters, come to me, the Rig Veda. And I love these mountain streams which are, not at all deep, sort of, they, when you put your feet in there, they come up till your ankles. But there's that beautiful feeling of touching the pebbles, rounded pebbles underneath. I can see the stones at the bottom fluctuate through the clear water. This is a Saki, uh, a haiku poet. They both listened silently to the water, which to them was not just water, but the voice of life, the voice of being, the voice of perpetual becoming. That's Hermann Hesse for us. And you must have seen these, mountain uh, streams splashing down at such maddening sort of paces. And they also make a music. I love that sound. Uh, these are pink flamingos, of course, but the first one, she gave him a little bit of a kiss, if you notice. And as soon as that happened, he turned around and they made this little pink heart. And then uh, it was like this primordial symbol of love. You see that sometimes in South India, you see in the temple sites, there are these two snakes coiled up like this, you know. So love will set me free. Loving hearts. Sometimes when we feel lonely, we come together. Uh, this is a Himalayan eagle I shot at. I was at a trek at 13,000 feet, and he'd probably come to see what kind of creatures had come in his mountainscape because he rules the mountains. Above the mighty Himalayas, amongst the clouds, I wander. And with that, of course, we have these beautiful fish, happy and free in some of the mountain lakes. This I like because, there's that sort of might and strength of the water. And you have these gentle, small, delicate little flowers, sort of challenging that strength of the water with just their grace and their gentleness. I like the right-hand side one, I call it the last tree standing tall and brave. Many a storm have come and gone. But yeah, this is probably the last village before the snow line. But the sad part is that that last poor tree has been so cut down because of, firewood requirements that the poor thing is so weak and strong. But, you know. And the beautiful Himalayas. Nature is the greatest artist. And the beautiful, untouched, pristine snow that is just freshly fallen on the mountainside. This is my favorite high altitude meadow. It's called the Chandrakani Pass, and it's around at 12, 13,000 feet, and it's just full of flowers. When you come here, when you walk across, you're just trampling flowers, and you can't spend many days there. So I've only been fortunate to spend 3-4 days whenever I go, but I've been there about 5-7 times. I like it. The mountains are calling, and I must go. Thou art that, Tattvamasi. The bull is there, very classical, and the rocks, they all look like Shivlingams, sort of created by nature. And of course, in the rain, the gift of madness is a blessing. It sets me free. My life dances lightly on the edge of time, like dew on the tip of a leaf, is Rabindranath Tagore. Well, फिर से ऑन करते हैं. Yeah. Huh. That's more or less what I wanted to present today.
Nitin, this is phenomenal. This is Salil. Good morning from the US. This is awesome. Keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Ma'am, would you like to say something?
Well, I think I should not say anything because the beauty which Nitinji shared will be lost in the words.
Ma'am, you're muted. I'm sorry, ma'am.
Oh, sorry about that. I was just saying that the beauty which Nitinji shared will be lost in the words. And without the words, we don't have the words where we can experience beauty. So there we are in the tussle of beauty versus words to express the beauty. Thank you so much, Nitinji.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And thank you so much, Nitin, sir. So if there are any questions or anything that you would like to discuss with Nitin, sir, you can write it out in our chat box and we'll take up the questions. I see one question by Anusha Sinha. Okay, I'm trying to unmute you. You can proceed with whatever you want to ask.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for such a wonderful experience. I felt like we are like I was there. Your pictures were so your pictures spoke for themselves. Sir, I have a very few questions. As initially you talked about that, art, it can either be art form or either you can commercialize it. Can there, can there ever be a possibility that these both things intersect each other, or all these both things can never come together? And my second question to you is that when an art is created, does the artist always have certain kind of vision, or it can also go through on impulse and inspiration? Is it important that your art form always has to have certain kind of vision? Because even if we put it out there, like for example, you said you saw a shivling and somebody else can see something else. So should art be restricted to what artist is viewing it the way he's viewing it? Thank you.
You know what, Miro, there's a famous painter called Miro, and he had a painting exhibition, and he had these paintings up for sale. So an art critic came to him and said, so what this painting, what is it saying? And Miro said, don't ask me, ask the guy who bought it, because he saw some sense in it. So I would say, that it's probably a impulse and a passionate sort of thing that you sort of cultivate, and you work on it. It's everyone has art as a gift, because we have all got dhwani, we've got prana, so we've got dhwani. And if I have dhwani, I'm going to communicate, whether I'm communicating through words or I'm communicating through drawings or paintings or dance or whatever I'm communicating through, I am communicating. Now, the question is, do you want to make noise or do you want to make music? That is about as much of a choice as you've been given with this gift of prana. That's my take on it. You have been given prana, okay, you're breathing in, breathing out for a few thousand times more, probably, or maybe a million times more. But what use are you making of that prana? Because you have that prana, you're going to create dhwani. The child breathes in, it cries. Now, are you going to make a noise? Are you going to be politically or are you philosophically looking at it? Are you going to benefit people or are you going to create chaos? I mean, that's about choice that we have as human beings given to us. So, as an artist, and all of us are artists in some way or the other. All of us are, whether we are writing, whether we are talking to people, whether whatever we are doing, now you could do that beautifully or you could make an ugly thing out of it. That choice is all that you have. So as an artist, you are now left with yourself first. That's why, I say that one of the first things probably anybody should do is find a place in wilderness, and stay there alone for 10 or 15 days. So that you look at that wilderness every day. Wilderness means it could be a wildlife sanctuary, it could be some nature park, it could be whatever, but it should be wilderness, it should be nature, it shouldn't be like a resort, It should be some place where you can be alone with yourself, And you spend 15 days there. For the first 5-10 days, you look at everything outside. After that, you start looking inside. It's bound to happen to you, Now, either you'll live in your old memories, which are your past, or you'll get stuck in anxiety and your future, or you'll live that moment. If you're going to live that moment, then you start looking at beautiful things inside you. And as soon as you've connected with that beautiful stuff inside you, and it's all there, it's there with everyone, because you're seeing it outside, you're hearing the birds sing from morning to evening, all day long, all those 7-8 days that you were there in the wilderness alone, you just heard those birds singing. You only seen the flowers blooming. So what is going to happen to you? You're going to reach a sort of peaceful space inside yourself. So that's why in the film, you might have noticed I've made all the characters first white, because there's nothing inside us. If you're going to live in a crowded place where people are fighting all the time, then there's going to be a fight inside us happening all the time also. Whether you want to accept it or not, you'll not really be happy with that. If you're a peaceful sort of person, wherein when you're in the wilderness, then it's going to connect to you. And commercial art, people, the universities teach commercial art. I teach in this department of design at the Delhi Technological University, where, they're making products mostly. Product design is a big thing, and that is definitely art application. But when I am talking to you about this kind of stuff that I've been chasing all my life, it's sort of that art which helps you. It's not that art which I am going to put forward to, the market. It's non-commercial. Firstly, you have to accept the fact that it's non-commercial. This whole space of consciousness that all of us are working in is non-commercial. It has no financial or material benefit. It's only your own self. So for instance, now, I went to this place called Ganpati Pule. Have you been there? Any of you? It's just by down from Maharashtra, in Mumbai, you go down to Alibag and then you walk down. There's a place called Ganpati Pule, a beautiful beach resort. And there's a Swayambhu Ganesha. So I said, Swayambhu Ganesha, I want to go and see that. So I went and looked at it. Then when I saw that Swayambhu, which means self-appearing, I said, this kind of Swayambhu Ganesha I've seen all over the place. I've seen it in the leaves, in the trees, in the grasses, in the flowers. Wherever I look, I can find a pattern of Om or Ganesha. They are the easiest patterns to see in nature, incidentally. So my Mati series, which I'm still to take out, is all images of Om that I've seen in nature. On the beach, in the sand, on the leaves, in the shells, everywhere. If you stand underneath a gulmohar tree, and you look at all those little twigs of the gulmohar carefully, and you keep looking at it, or a laburnum tree, you'll find the Om right there looking up at your face. I've got, maybe 20, 30 of those kind of photographs, which I'll still to take out for my next series. So that's what I'm trying to say, that if you already got nature inside you, then, you see it. Otherwise, you don't see it. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. We'll take a quick comment or a question by Sukanya. Then I request Amruta, the chairperson of today's lecture, to kindly give her comments. Sukanya, please go on.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful presentation. It was really nice. When I used to go to the field, we used to stay in the forest bungalows. So throughout the night, we used to hear the sounds of waterfalls, sounds of various animals, birds, and all. So this presentation remind me all these things. Thank you so much, sir.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Yeah. Where are you from, Sukanya?
Sir, I'm from Kerala, from Palakkad.
Okay.
Currently, I'm working at NIAS as researcher.
Okay. Yeah, Kerala is a beautiful
That's
state.
all.
Such a beautiful state.
Yes.
Oh, amazing.
Sukanya has done tremendous work with tribal people and with nature. So yeah, she's currently a research scholar with our team. So yeah.
So the characters that you saw in my animation are all actually from tribal arts. I animated I animated 5 tribal arts.
Yeah.
Because I think
that video is very nice.
If you look at original Indian animation, we'll have to go to tribal art and folk art. Imagine Madhubani paintings animated, or like the Varli tribal paintings or the Gondi paintings which are animated. I've done with 5 art forms, but it's an amazing thing. You're very lucky that you're connected with a tribe, because I just love the culture and the art and the lifestyle of the tribal people of India. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sukanya. I'll now request Amruta MK, a research scholar with our team. She is currently working on Indian aesthetics and connecting it with Kashmir Saivism. So yeah, so I'll request Amruta to please go ahead with the comments.
Thank you so much, sir, for a visual treat. I really enjoyed all the photographs, and it was really nice. So as you have just mentioned, like to be on it, you have to be before it. Like when you capture all the photographs, you have to think even before it, right? So once when you are traveling all through these places, like how did you come to these, like with these photographs? As a you might have enjoying all those moments. So, but when did you come to that right moment of clicking it? How did you come about it?
I'll tell you an example. I was walking with my sister on the beach at Alibag, and we had just been walking for half an hour, and then suddenly I started taking out my camera, and it wasn't a beautiful sunset or something. It was just an ordinary evening, and she said, "Why are you taking your camera out?" And I said, "I think there is a photograph coming." So she says, "What? You've been walking with me for half an hour. The camera was in your bag. And now you're pulling it out saying that there is a photograph coming." And just then, we were walking at that place where the waves touch your ankles. So just then one wave came in front of me. And when it went back, you won't want to believe this, but there was an Om. Okay. And I took that photograph of that Om. And, with digital cameras, there is picture resolution. I was taking in a low resolution because I was taking photographs of my relatives where they were staying. And so I thought I'll change my aperture and shutter speed setting so that I can get a better resolution of this Om. And the next wave came and the Om was gone. So that's it. It came to me. I mean, that's what it is about your art. You have to breathe it, live it, feel it, know it, sort of, and of course your nature, your subject. And so I just had that instinctive feeling, and we have instinctive feelings, but we don't follow them. We get those messages, we see those miracles, but we don't want to believe that they are miracles. So you get those great messages from whatever the cosmos or the universe, but you don't want to believe they are those messages. So you don't see them, you don't feel them, you don't react to them, you know. But as soon as you start reacting to them, you get the result, you know. So that Om was there for just that one shot, and it's so transient, you know. In nature, things are really that transient, you know. It's there for a flash of a moment, you'll see it and it's gone. That butterfly is sitting on that flower, and I look at you, and both of us are in the same park, and I say, hey, Amruta, look at that flower, look at that butterfly. And by the time you turn your head and look, the butterfly is gone. So you didn't see it, but I saw it, and both of us are in the same place, you know. So that's the amazing thing about nature, you know, this transient sort of character, you know, where nothing is permanent. And because of his non-permanence, when you get that miracle sort of thing, you know, you enjoy it. You say, oh my God, I couldn't even believe that this thing could have happened, you know. So that's the fun of these art forms. Yeah.
And so with respect to the cameras that we have right now, digital cameras, that we have the possibility of clicking multiple photos of the same. And earlier we had only like the clicks were actually very important. So do you find any difference in the possibility of the digital camera, or do you tend to see it as taking multiple shots?
You know, I came from that old era where we bought transparencies, and every photograph was so important and so expensive that you really thought a lot before you took that photograph. And now I'm taking digital photographs. And of course, there's a great advantage. I see immediately my result. So I know immediately what shutter speed, aperture I want, you know, what ISO I want to work with. It's there and then, instant gratification, so to say, you know, which wasn't there before. So definitely the photography is going to go up in leaps and bounds. Look at all those mobile phones. They have such amazing cameras now. You know, you probably don't need a DSLR anymore, you know, because technology is taking you there. You're going to have the most amazing gadgets in your hand, and you can capture any fraction of time, you know. So the quality of photography is also going to improve a lot. The competitiveness is going to improve a lot. You know, your vision, because each one of us comes with a special vision. Each one of us sees the world differently. They see it from, you see it from your eyes. What you see, nobody else is going to see. You're unique in that sense. Your vision is your vision, full stop. You know, half a millimeter here or 2 inches there is a different vision. So you have that vision. It's already there. And now we have the technology with that gadget. So you could be capturing some of the most amazing things with the gadgets that you have now. And I think it's a great thing. It's demystified, it's simplified, it's made available in everybody's hands. I think it's great. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. As we're running a little short of time, I'll just request one more question by Sudha Ramakrishnan. Ma'am, please proceed with your question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this wonderful journey of visual poetry. My question is, the photographs and the art form, especially, is very much related to beauty. What is your take on contemporary art, where, you know, most of the time we see beauty divorced from art? What is your take on that, sir?
Well, you know, I mean, there's a very interesting film I made, you know. At one time, there were 2 sick people in my house, you know, and I couldn't do any work. So I thought that if I walk out of my house and I take a walk, and I was staying in a sort of crowded village colony, and I take a walk around 2 blocks and come back home, I should be able to make a film. So what should I do? So I said, I'll make a film on all the street people. And I'll say that the people on the street, they're also all artists. Because the vegetable salesman, the way he arranges his vegetables, he contrasts the green with the red and the yellow in such a beautiful way that when you go and look at his vegetables, you're attracted. They're fresh, and they're, you know, the vegetables are sort of calling you. When you go to the Golgappa wala, even the Golgappa wala is an artist in the way that he keeps all his pots and the way he designs everything. And you say, you know, so I got funded to make this film called Art on the Streets, you know. And then after the film was over, and I had all these small time shops, these radies with plastics. I don't I'm sure you've seen them. They've got amazing variety of things in plastics. They've got little strainers and combs and little mirrors and tikkis and all sorts of things. But the way they arrange it with kerchiefs hanging from the top and a little bit of trickled toys which will make a sound, the way they arrange it is so artistic that the layman, the local village person, or the one who's the maid who's working in your house, she gets attracted to it and she buys something from it. So when I made that, then there were 4 critics, and 3 of them loved my film, and the 4th one said that this is not art. The Golgappa wala is not art. The Jeera Pani wala. The Jeera Pani wala, if you have noticed, he has this little matka on which he has a red cloth which is wet, and he has a necklace of green chilies and yellow lemons, and he has this little ladle, and on the top of the ladle he has a ghungru. Would you believe that? So when he is shaking his Jeera Pani on the roadside, you can hear that ghunguru, and a community of people connect with that ghunguru, and they come to drink his Jeera Pani. And if I put that in a modern art gallery, you'll say that this is art also. I think it is art actually. I think it is street art, and it's a beautiful art form. Then of course we have people making all the Durga Puja. Everything is on the street. This is amazing.
Thank you so much, sir. The chat box is flooded with compliments, and
thank you so
people
much.
are actually in meditative trance seeing the pictures. So thank you so much for such a great visual treat for us. So as we're running a little ahead of time, I'll just quickly request one last question. That is by Mr. Praveen. Please go on with your question.
Good evening, sir. You are able to hear me, right?
Yes.
Sir, yes, I was also able to connect to you because you spoke from a spiritual background. When I go to a beautiful place, sit hours and hours together, there's something, there's only just a small fraction of a second when there's a stillness, there's emptiness, when you feel there's nothing like you that is observing, there is just the observation taking place. And then you decide you should take the camera on, and then it becomes mechanical. Don't you feel there's a change there when you are just be in the moment, and then you are taking the camera and trying to capture it, and there's something, then you are coming to capture something there.
Very good, yeah, Praveen. Very good, yeah. I love your question, because for that fraction of moment when you're taking the photograph, you're distracted and you've lost your meditative attention. So true. But the thing is that, and of course the camera can't capture that moment, because that moment is 360 degrees around it. So, it's the breeze touching you, and it's the magic is happening all over. It's not just in that little square frame that I capture on my camera, but that is sort of leaving me as a memory, of this beautiful moment that I shared in nature. That is all. But otherwise, you're right. It is a distraction, and you should just enjoy nature in its pure form without really any excess baggage to carry with you. You're absolutely right.
Thank you so much, Praveen, for the question, and thank you, Nitin sir. So we have come to the end of the session with lovely compliments for you, sir. So on behalf of Team CSP and also Professor Sangeeta Menon, thank you so much for accepting the invitation and for such a visual treat that you prepared for us. So thank you, and thank you everyone in the audience. So to tune in every Friday and making each Friday lecture a success for us. So our team will catch up with you next Friday with a new lecture on post-humanism, a path of self-discovery. That's another interesting lecture we have planned for you. So thank you so much. Have a great evening. We'll see you next Friday. Thank you so much, Nitin sir.
Thank you. Thank you.